Host Christine Marie. We are talking about something, frankly, that we've touched on at different times throughout the show, but we've never really dug into it, especially with such an expert. We are talking about how AI is really coming in and integrating itself into our human experience and how much it's adjusting the way that we are thinking, the way we're experiencing human connection and just connection with ourselves in general. And so I am thrilled to have Dorsey Standish here with me today. Dory, you have worked with American Airlines, you've worked with Toyota, you've worked with some of the largest leading brands in the world, and you also work in small group settings as well as individual coaching. And you're working really closely to help people understand kind of that mind-body connection and understanding the neuroscience of how we function and how we show up. And especially, I asked you this in the green room, how and what is on your mind right now, considering everything that you've been kind of working through? And you said you and your clients are talking a lot about how AI is impacting the human body and just the neuro. I guess we could say kind of I'm curious if this resonates, but like almost the physiological nature of the human being in this really tech-driven world. I mean, you can't even now get into a car without having the ability to have it drive itself. So I'm just curious, how are you processing all of this change, especially given your own experience with kind of, you've got this engineering background and then you've come in with this fascination around wellness and really come to be a global speaker yourself. So how are you processing everything that's happening in today's just kind of the digital environment?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me, Christine. It's a pleasure to be on the Knowing Show. Just grateful for the opportunity to talk to your audience. And I love that you started with AI and humanity because, as you mentioned, I have a technical background. I'm a mechanical engineer by training and went back to school to get a master's in neuroscience when my own burnout experience actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise because it forced me to train my brain for greater resilience. And I was so amazed at these short practices, how they were changing my behavior, how I was showing up, how I was feeling internally and showing up externally, that I wanted to understand how that works. So I went back to school, did a master's in neuroscience, and little did I know that brain health framing would be exceptionally valuable where we find ourselves today, right? As artificial intelligence technology has accelerated so quickly. And here's the thing about research is we're always a little behind, right? Where we are, like what we're experiencing day to day, it takes a long time to get those, double blind, gold standard research studies done. And so the research that we're seeing today, we're starting to see some effects of AI, like cognitive surrender. People are less willing to stay with a hard problem. They're more willing to just give it up to AI. They're less willing to say, I don't know, when they have access to AI information. Even if the AI is wrong, they're more wanting to be that expert. And so I think we're going to be in for a surprise in the next decade and more to see how our nervous systems continue to respond to and adapt to AI. I try to be an optimist about it because you mentioned your car driving itself. I am a huge fan of Tesla full self-driving. It's like my ultimate AI hack. Like, thank goodness I can take that cognitive load off me and let a computer do it. But I think that this time in our lives also presents a unique opportunity for us to look at what do we do really well as human beings and what can we offload and empower a machine to do so that we can lean more into those human skills in this age.
So good. And I completely agree. I had my first self-driving Tesla experience last week and I was like, this really is all that it's cracked up to be. So I'm a converter by far. Dorsey, you had kind of this pivotal experience in your life that really led to you obviously going back to school. I mean, it was most people when they go through something that sounds like they talk about burnout, but to the extent that you were willing to go to really understand why is this happening inside of me and what's the science behind it and how can you talked about how behaviors can really be adjusted by the type of programming that you were able to learn. So can you talk a little bit of just about kind of the before and then during piece of what you experienced? What did the burnout look like for you? And then what actually did you study? When we talk about neuroscience, you can talk to us like we're in third grade here just to make it so that we all really understand the terms that we're using for this entire conversation moving forward. What exactly did you study?
Yeah, of course. So when right in the months leading up to my burnout, mental health crisis, leave of absence, from the outside looking in, my life looked great, right? I was traveling back and forth to Asia. My parents were so proud, like they're mechanical engineer daughters, climbing the corporate ladder, doing all these things. And I think that's what maybe we don't talk about enough, especially with social media being this shiny highlight reel, is a lot of times burnout looks good on the outside. On the inside, I was drinking a lot of coffee. I was not sleeping well. I did not have strong, internal coping mechanisms to deal with the stress and pressure that I was feeling. Just, in my mid 20s, I was leading older engineers in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, trying to push to get this product launch done. And I didn't have the benefit of some of the perspective that you get just by going through these things, right? And so it felt like the world was on my shoulders. And looking back now, I can laugh at that or smile at that. But in the moment, I felt like I had to show up for the team. And that meant if I woke up at 3 a.m. and couldn't sleep, I would get on my email, right? I would be up late for conference calls, up early, getting venti Starbucks refills. It was all about, for me, performance and what it looked like on the outside. And there was not a lot of care or awareness even of what was happening on the inside, which is why when I had that routine doctor's appointment, just going about my day, and my doctor looks at me like, are you okay? Like, are you okay? That kind of like pause question. He said, you're talking really fast. Are you sleeping? Like, you seem kind of disconnected. And
Wow.
it was like a pause moment where all of a sudden I thought, oh my gosh, like, am I okay? I'm glad this person is a mirror for me. And, one doctor's appointment led to another. And next thing you know, I'm on a 2.5-month leave of absence from my corporate job, which not everyone can do, right? So I'm grateful I had those resources to be able to step away and get better. But after the first week or two of just sleeping, because I was so exhausted, I had this moment where I was, instead of these conference calls all day long, I was talking to doctors. And it's like, everybody has an opinion. You need to take this medicine. You need to do this. And I thought to myself, what got me into this situation is exactly this, is listening to what everybody else wants me to do and not listening to me. And I still listen to the doctors because I believe in Western medicine. And I made a decision that I would also cultivate internal resources so that I was also listening inwardly and taking steps to cultivate my inner resilience in tandem with those external supports. That led me, as you mentioned, I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher. And so I start, Googling resilience. At the time, we didn't have AI to summarize this nicely for us. And meditation, mindfulness, mindset kept coming up. And I'm like, please let it be something different. I'm so type A. I love to check boxes, did not want to sit still. But I was desperate enough that when the answers kept pointing there, I was like, I'll do a minute a day of mindfulness for 4 weeks and see what happens. It's 11 plus years later, so obviously it changed my life. What we see in the data when we look at self-report data from people who start mindfulness practices is that they actually feel better before any of their physiological metrics change. So before their resting heart rate drops, before they, show lower levels of cortisol in their blood, they feel better. And that's what I felt after just those 4 weeks. I could feel myself more focused. I could feel myself more present with people. And even when I went back to work, I was less reactive, and I had this intangible sense that I was starting my day connecting with me before I went out and took care of the world all around me. And that was just such an amazing experience for me to go through personally, that as a scientist, I wanted to keep understanding it and measuring it and helping other type A folks learn, which is what within a couple of years took me back to school to get a master's in neuroscience as well. The benefit of that is it also adds credibility. A lot of the work that I do today is in the corporate space. I love helping other type A skeptics like me. So my company Mastermind works in high stress industries, especially like construction, finance, law, healthcare, where there's so much pressure and people tend to be type A and driven and resonate with that burnout story, or maybe earlier on, right? And I started my company Mastermind because I don't want anyone else to have to break down or burn out before they realize that their brain health has to be the foundation of their performance. So I can go into more details about what I learned in the neuroscience degree and kind of how that tracked back to my experience. But I realize I've been talking.
I love this, and frankly, you're very good at storytelling, which I'm just so grateful for, because it really does set the stage, for what you experienced. And I think so many people are resonating. I know that I resonated when you were talking about just wanting to do, and maybe this is a tangent we can touch on in a little bit. How identity is really wrapped up in what we do, and so it's not just, oh, that's my personality. It's like, no, actually, my sense of worth can come from what I do. And so to eliminate the amount, let's say, or even change course completely, there's a real identity question that can come into play, where it can be kind of covered and buried underneath to your point, type A, because I resonate with that a lot. I'm definitely type A, and even the logical side. And that part of us has been cultivated since we were kids. We were never taught to cultivate that inner compass and that ability to listen internally, but just kind of be told what to do rather than taught how to be. So I would love for you to continue the story of, like, what did you really study?
Yeah. Gosh, I resonate so much with what you just brought up there, and the identity piece. And I'll segue into the neuroscience. I want to call out for folks, like, it is so easy to tell the story 11 years later and make it seem like this shiny, great. And, I'm here talking to you. I have a company, like, I have a wife and kids. Like, I'm so grateful that Brain Health Foundation has enabled me to create a really beautiful life and benefit from that. And if you met me in the summer of 2015, you might have said what my colleague did when he saw me during my leave of absence, and we sat down for lunch, and he goes, "You look like you got hit by a train." It was, I had gained weight. I went from, like, again, this busy, like, caffeine fueled corporate career to sitting in, like, my little apartment. The thing that I don't often talk about, Christine, about the burnout experience is how lonely it was. I'm starting to share about it more as we get into this conversation around AI and humanity and how human connection can really be our superpower. It's hard to be left with yourself and realize you're in crisis, and oh my gosh, like, who's there to help me and support me? And I saw, I think it was a PBS special. They were talking about the loneliness crisis, and they were saying people have thousands of followers and no one to feed their cat when they go on vacation. Right? Like, that was me, right? This big shiny life. And then it's like, when I had a crisis, who was there? I think that sometimes it's those hard moments that show us what we're made of, and also show us who our people are. And I'm so grateful that, as I've had multiple children in the past few years, and I've gone through my own mental health struggles, later on in life, people have showed up for me. And I see that as a testament to, when we go inwards and cultivate strength and presence here, we can more easily go outwards and share that same strength and presence with others. Which brings me to the brain, because I could talk, I could tell stories and everything. So I'm writing the second draft of my book on trainable resilience, which will come out in 2027. And it's been such a learning experience to write a book, and beautiful in that it has forced me to go really deep into these concepts that I'm trying to teach. And it's helped me pull out these nuances and stories, which I'm really grateful for. And it's also an opportunity to talk about neuroscience in really practical terms. So I'll be honest and say that, when you go to school to get a master's in cognitive neuroscience, there's a whole bunch of classes you take, and not all of them directly relate to, like, exactly what I want to learn about, right? Like, I took a class on auditory processing, which even that had an attention component, in that sometimes people who have a hard time hearing with background noise, it's not deafness, it's an attention issue. So my wife has ADHD. So if you imagine, like, you're in a busy room and there's lots of loud noise around you and you can't carry on a conversation because you keep getting distracted, that's actually, if you train your attention, you can hear other people better because you're tuning in to one specific person. So what I did throughout my degree was I looked for specific ways to use my passion for mindfulness, for brain health, for sleep and recovery, and lean into those classes and those angles of the classes. I took classes on memory, on attention, and what I try to do now when I speak is, it's like the brain is like the ultimate crazy piece of furniture from IKEA or equipment you buy, and you're like, how do I use this, right? And nobody has the instruction manual. And it's this thing that really determines, we know that our brain literally shapes how we take in our environment around us and the experiences that we have in our lives. So it's really important to understand that and be able to work with it intentionally, which is where this concept of positive neuroplasticity comes in. Neuroplasticity just means that the brain is plastic. It's always changing in its structure and its connection. So our brain today is not the same as our brain 10 years ago, thank goodness, or our brain tomorrow. Like, we are literally shifting it through our actions, through our choices, through this conversation that we're having. If you're watching this, right, the brain is constantly shifting and changing, and positive neuroplasticity simply means we're changing it for the better. So rather than being a victim of our circumstances, like, one way that we're seeing neuroplasticity right now is the rise of short form video and impacting our attention span, right?
Yeah.
So scrolling through shorts, like I have a 15-year-old that I'm like, get off scrolling the shorts, right? Because we see that when you train your brain to pay attention in these short, exciting 15-second bursts, that's what it craves, and it has trouble staying present for those longer conversations, like the 30-minute, conversation you'd have with your partner to get through something difficult, or the 60-minute presentation you need to give to a client at work, right? Whatever we're doing on a regular basis, we're training our brains for. And that's what I want to bring it back to with that 1-minute mindfulness and resilience practice that I started 11 years ago, is that small choice, like 1 minute, 60 seconds. It doesn't have to be big. Dr. Rick Hansen says that our brain is like a muscle. We can cultivate resilience in under 60 seconds. Small actions help us to build that resilience muscle in the brain. So I've built my personal life and also my career around inspiring people to do one thing for their brain every day. We have 1,440 minutes. And the overarching theme I learned in school is that we're still learning a lot about the brain, and our brain is always changing. And so looking at what we're doing on a daily basis, 40 to 95% of our day is typically habit driven. If you can master some good habits, like, that takes a huge cognitive load off and can uplift your life over time. It's like an upward spiral. I know a lot about a downward spiral. Even, before my burnout experience, I've used pretty much every negative coping mechanism in the book. Like, when I talk, especially to construction audiences or groups, that, it's easy to look at me now and think, oh, what does she know about, drinking too much or whatever it is. It's like, no, I've done a lot of stuff. I've done the downward spiral where you make one choice, it makes you feel worse, increases your stress, and then you keep doing that. These small positive neuroplastic actions are an upward spiral of resilience. So you make a choice. Like, we did a pause before we got on this show. We aligned ourselves, we breathed. That makes us feel better. And it also strengthens our brain over time. So when we make these small, repeatable action choices, we're creating this upward spiral of resilience for both our well-being and our performance.
I love that. And then I'd like to, we talked about kind of terms and definitions. When you're talking about brain resilience, what does that, when you say that, what does that mean to you?
So my favorite definition of resilience is also from Dr. Rick Hansen. And he says it's the ability to move through challenges. So a lot of times we stop there. We say resilience is moving through challenges. He says it's the ability to move through challenges in the pursuit of opportunities. Right? Towards what's possible. So
love that. Oh, that's so good.
That's the word. That's the words. From a brain perspective, there's one particular pathway that really governs executive function, emotional resilience, stress regulation. And you said to explain it like like your third grader. So I'll explain it like I talk to my toddler. So my wife and I have a 15-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 9-month-old baby. So never a dull moment and lots of opportunities to regulate myself and hopefully co-regulate with them. But my toddler has been a full-on three-nager, just like tantrums and struggles. And so he loves the dinosaur T-Rex. So I call it his T-Rex brain. And I teach him the hand brain model, which you might have seen before. It's an approximation of the brain, very, very approximate. But in this hand model brain, you can imagine that the knuckles right here, the tops of the fingers, are the prefrontal cortex. So right behind the forehead, the prefrontal cortex is like the CEO of the brain. Rational decisions, higher order thinking, emotion regulation. This is the part of the brain that doesn't fully develop until well into our 20s and then continues to grow throughout our lifetime. So that's a part of the brain that typically my clients want to strengthen and build. If you lift up the hood, if you will, you can see the limbic system here and the reptilian brain, the brainstem. Again, these are just approximations of areas like the amygdala, which is like the fight or flight center of the brain, kind of like the smoke detector, always on alert for threat or challenge. And the hippocampus, the center of learning and new memories. And these areas of the brain, the limbic system, are the more primitive areas of the brain, and their job is to keep us safe. So when we experience strong emotions, like maybe we get angry and we find ourselves making fists or clenching our jaw, or we check our email and we see that email from that person, we're like, or we're scanning the room when we walk in and noticing people's facial expressions, right? That's the amygdala scanning, looking for threats or challenges. Not because it's a bad part of the brain, it's because it's trying to keep us safe. So when we look at the brains of more resilient people, they still get activated in their limbic system. So this is what I call the T-Rex brain for my toddler. I'm like, we got to calm down T-Rex and bring back the Beck brain, right? So even in resilient people, they still experience that T-Rex brain, that amygdala hijack. People still get activated and stressed. What's different when the University of Wisconsin, Richie Davidson put different groups in the scanner, in the brain scanner, and stressed them out and watched kind of how their brains responded. In the brains of more resilient people, they still had that amygdala reaction, that stress response. What was different is that compared to less resilient people, their prefrontal regions fired up to 30 times as much. So think about that bicep curl for the mind analogy, right? They get stressed out. Their amygdala is not the only part of the brain that goes, ah! Their prefrontal cortex also fires to help keep them regulated and respond rather than react to that challenge. This pathway between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, these white matter connections between brain cells, this is the most important pathway in the brain for personal emotional intelligence, for stress management, for resilience. And that's the subject of my book in the 3 R's for Resilience framework is 3 ways that we can intentionally train this pathway for strength, either by intentionally strengthening the upper regions of the brain or intentionally down-regulating the lower regions of the brain. Resilience is trainable. This pathway in the brain is something that we can train. If you are like me and blessed with an emotional personality and like lots of like that is something that can be strengthened, not to make us have no personality or always be perfectly calm, but like those resilient people in the brain scanner, we get activated and we keep our rational brain online so we don't turn into T-Rex, right? We stay with that brain, that full brain online.
I love that. I know you said, I'm going to explain it to you like I do my toddler. Honestly, Dorsey, that it's so memorable that having that example and even what you did with your hand. So thank you. I love that. And you just explained it so beautifully. You're a great teacher. So just want to thank you for that. I'd love to know, when you're talking about how do we keep the prefrontal cortex online? You said you did 1 minute of mindfulness every day for 4 weeks and that kind of hooked you. What did that look like? What did those 60 seconds look like? I'm assuming you set your alarm on your phone or timer. And did you close your eyes? Like, what did you do during those 60 seconds just to initially kind of get that prefrontal cortex acclimated in that way?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan, as you know, of these short practices. For me, because mindfulness is what I started with, that's always going to be my first recommendation. And I'll go into details on how to start practicing that. I will say though, if you're like, she said mindfulness, I'm going to, swipe through, or I'm not going to watch this. Like, there are so many ways to grow our resilience. It could be strong social connections. It could be journaling. It could be running. Like, I don't want to say mindfulness has to be the answer. What I'm saying is that there is strong research that mindfulness interventions increase your physical and mental resilience. And mindfulness directly acts on that pathway that we're looking to train. And it does so really in two ways. So the first way is that it simply cultivates this curious kind awareness that helps us notice things, or the R I use of resilience is called recognize. It helps us to notice, oh, stress, anxiety. Like, have you ever found yourself yelling before realizing that you're stressed? Like, that's the kind of thing. It slows down that stimulus to response, and cultivating mindfulness helps us to better know ourselves and grow that self-awareness so we can be experts on our own nervous system and give ourselves what we need. In addition to that recognizing, mindfulness also helps us to reset the central nervous system. So that means a bottom-up signal that we are safe. We don't have to think our way into it or do anything. Our body, our lower regions of our brain, that T-Rex brain, if we do a deep breath into the belly and out, I know nobody wants to hear take a deep breath when they're stressed out, but it's stimulating the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve that runs from the base of the brain through all the major regions of the body. And it works from a scientific perspective. Same thing with splashing cold water on your face. Same thing with the body scan practice, which is a type of mindfulness. Same thing with that social connection that I mentioned, or walking. All of these ways are bottom-up signals that we are safe, that calm us down. And when we are calmer, we have that stronger propensity for resilience going forward. So mindfulness works so well for resilience because it helps us grow our self-awareness, and it helps us to calm down. Simply because most of the mindfulness techniques that are recommended that I just mentioned, such as the breathing and the body scan, again, stimulate the vagus nerve, signal safety to the brain. When I teach mindfulness, I always get asked, what apps do I use? And I'm honest, like when 2015, I used the Calm app. That was like when mindfulness apps were like the new thing, and Tamara Levitt was doing the daily Calm. She was like my person, my guru. I'll never, her voice will be ingrained in my nervous system, I think, forever. So I read Get Some Headspace by Andy Puddicombe, the founder of Headspace. I read books by Pema Chodron. I listened to sessions on the Calm app because as an engineer, it was really important for me to understand what I was doing. And so I try to, in our mindfulness keynotes, I try to give that basic science, kind of like the T-Rex brain that I explained, enough so that people go, okay, mindfulness is a way of paying attention. I already do it. I'm curious. I'm kind. I'm engaged in this present moment. I'm letting go of judgment, and I'm being right here, right now. And I'm using an anchor like my breath, my body, my senses to just feel into this present moment. There's no way to do it wrong. So when we get distracted and overwhelmed, that's a moment to practice mindfulness. It's actually a positive thing because every time you bring your attention back to the present moment, it's like that bicep curl for the mind. You're doing the Rick Hansen thing of building your resilience. So there's no way to do it wrong. And it's a way of paying attention. People love apps, but I don't know about you. My phone is like the opposite of mindfulness.
I completely agree. It's so distracting. Even the blue light stimulation, I'm like, oh.
It's so much. And even just when I pick mine up, I'll speak for me. I think about like my to-do list app or, social media, and it's like, ooh. So for me, I recommend more and more when I speak with people that they have technology they can use to support them. They also have the inner technology of their breath, their body, and their five senses. And so if you're present for listening to our podcast together, that can be a moment of mindfulness. If you feel your feet right now in your shoes, that's a moment of mindfulness. If you feel a couple of rounds of steady breath in and out, that's a moment of mindfulness. Most of my clients start their mindfulness anchor practice in that 1 to 5 minute a day range, and they do it with their breath or their body, choosing one place to anchor into and come back to. That might be their breath right below their nostrils. That might be the feeling of their chest or belly rising or falling. If the breath doesn't work, they can feel sensations in the palms of their hands or the soles of their feet. And the practice is really simple. You bring that curious, kind attention to that anchor. And when you notice you've drifted in like 2 seconds, for most of us, you get to bring yourself back and begin again, and do that for the amount of time. It is hard. It's just like going to the gym when you've never worked out before. Like, you're in for some struggle. But
Yeah.
that feeling of struggle and resistance means that your brain is changing. It means that you're rewiring those pathways. So it's really important to lean into that challenge, to the feeling of coming back, and think of it just like training for your brain.
I really love that. And especially, I think you said Rick Hansen references it as a muscle. Really thinking of it like that. Like, I'm actually going to the gym for my brain. I'd love to hear your distinction between the brain and the mind.
That's an interesting question, and I have to be honest, I don't know that I've wrapped my head fully around it. I will talk. As you've seen, I can talk, right? So I can definitely talk about it. But I honestly think about that myself, because I will say that our company, Mastermind, during the pandemic especially, we used mental health a lot and mental well-being. And we've shifted more recently to a focus on brain health because of my specific training and other members of our team. And the fact that it's a physical organ, it's harder to argue with and quibble with, right? Because it's like there's literally a 3-pound-ish brain floating in cerebrospinal fluid in our heads. And so when we think about brain health, there are 6 clear pillars of stress management, sleep, nutrition, social connection, mental fitness, movement. And we know that when we train those 6 aspects, we can delay dementia onset. We can help ourselves be, more vital and more cognitively engaged well into our older years, not to mention happier and perform better during our careers or whatever matters most to us. So when I think about the brain, that's what I'm thinking about, right? That physical structure. When I think about the mind, it's a lot more nebulous. I think one of the most challenging things about mental health as it stands right now is that there's no way to reliably test for depression or anxiety in a way that's physiological. It depends on self-report data. I just went through treatment for postpartum depression earlier this year. I had a baby 9 months ago, and I can describe symptoms to my doctor, but there's no definitive test, right? It's based on his judgment and what I'm describing. Thank goodness the treatment that I was prescribed helped. I, went from a really dark place to feeling like myself again. And I'm really grateful for that. I think for some moms, it takes a lot longer. For some people that go through different struggles, it can take a lot longer. But it seems, a lot like a shot in the dark sometimes when they're like, let's try this medication or let's do this. And I would hope with the mind and with mental health, we're able to keep using our advances in AI and technology and our understanding of the physical brain to see if we can start to improve testing around mental health and diagnosis. I think that will also help with the stigma around it. When it's something that's a little bit more defined, I think that will help us as a society embrace mental health and the mind as well. So that's my short-ish answer.
I love it. Well, and I just want to go off on a quick tangent, and we'll come back to this. There's been a lot in the media around this mother who killed 3 of her children. And a lot of folks have come out of the woodwork, like in support of her. And it's really, which is at first blush, you're like, what the heck? She murdered her children. And the outcry is all the mothers saying, you all have no idea how dark it gets. And like, there's not enough support. There's not enough even research that's been done. The amount of research that has been done, even on women versus men, most of our science textbooks are geared towards research that was done for men. And I'm sure you know far more about that than I do. But I only learned about that, honestly, in the last probably 12 to 14 months, where I'm like, oh, wow, like I just had no idea that it was so skewed towards male in terms of the research side of things. So, what is it? Oh man, I'm trying to remember where women can get the cysts on their ovaries, and it's so incredibly painful. And like only in the last 5 years, I think that funding has been given to that research. And so there's just like so much that hasn't been conducted. So there's minimal help, and the consequences obviously are so high. And so I'd love to hear your perspective, even just on that case in the news right now. What is your approach to that right now, as you're kind of hearing and examining both sides, considering your experience as well as obviously your scientific bent, and you're leaning in that direction?
Yeah, of course. As you're talking, I just want to my wholehearted yes, women's health is an issue that continues to need to be raised and talked about more. The incident that you're talking about is so tragic, and it's an opportunity to again surface something that needs to be talked about. My speaking agent and agency, Loud Management, also represents several women health experts like Dr. Jessica Shepard, like Marissa Fair, who are doing such valuable work with their books, with their speaking, and they're educating people on exactly what you're saying. Just like the lack of data we have on women's health, the business case for it, the economic case, just the human case for it, and
Yeah.
how important it is. I wholeheartedly support that work. And as far as what's happening in the news, I have to say, I specifically do not engage a lot with the news cycles, because I find it overwhelming to be consistently confronted with negative news. So my wife makes fun of me because she's like an avid news reader. Her whole business is public relations. And so she's like very in the know. And all I ever want to talk about is research shows, or like the AI thing that I'm doing. So I'm sure she'll make fun of me for not knowing more details about the case that you're bringing up. I have to say, though, just hearing both sides, I've learned, because of everything I've been through in my life and because of my understanding of the brain, that there are two sides to every story, and that most people are trying their best in one way or another, and they are coming from a particular place for a reason. So through my meditation training, through my understanding of the brain, I try my best to lead with compassion and curiosity, even with a person that looks like we have absolutely nothing in common or did something horrific. And even these people coming out of the woodwork, right? All I can do, rather than cast judgment on them, what I can do, I believe, to contribute is to share my experience with postpartum depression. I've connected with moms who are in the same phase. Because here's the thing. I don't know. Christine, are you a mom?
No. Well, maybe a stepmom one day, but not yet.
Okay. So it's so crazy, because I have a 9-month-old, and I can cognitively kind of think back to what it was like in, postpartum 2-3 months when I was really struggling, but nothing is like that visceral feeling. And so I've found that it's really important in my tribe of women around me to have people who are in the same phase of motherhood, like down to the month, right? So you can be like I remember seeing some friends, and I had a 2-month-old baby in my arms, and they were like, "Oh, you're in it right now." I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess I am." Like, you just lose complete perspective. And for me, hearing what you're sharing about the darkness people experience, it was a specific moment. I did a speaking engagement, was what, like 2.5 months postpartum, to get on a stage. I'm still breastfeeding, nipple, just crazy, in a dress. And I give this keynote, And I just fell apart afterwards. Like the negative self-talk, the like I'm failing as like everything. And that's something I've always struggled with, but it got to the point where it wasn't something I could get myself out of. My support system could get me,
Yeah.
out of. I needed that pharmaceutical support. And I'm so grateful that I had the resources and the connections to be able to do that. I guess I just want to say to people out there, like, we literally never know what somebody else is going through ever. And so if we can lead with curiosity and compassion and tell real truth-based stories for each other, like there's so much healing available and so much wisdom is humanity. I mean, we started talking about AI and the human connection, right? No AI can ever have that true embodied empathy for that experience. There's no physical form to feel that. We as human beings have to give that to each other in a time where we're more divided and angry than ever. I see it as an opportunity for us to have conversations like this, where we're coming together, we're honoring our humanity from the inside out, and we're trusting that when we have these conversations that we can create a better world, a ripple effect by ripple effect.
There's two thoughts. I'm so grateful for this perspective, because as you're talking about, I'm glad you brought in AI at the end of this, because who knows how much AI was actually involved in her decision that she made. Whereas perhaps, and obviously it's all speculation in terms of what I'm about to say. However, we've seen other horror stories about people who have taken their own life because they had either a romantic relationship with an AI bot, and it was just really horrifying what ended up happening. And you just wonder, with the elimination of human to human connection for fear of judgment or fear of ridicule, because these types of conversations haven't been permissible. There's been so much shame around, what, you don't like your kid? Like, really? Like, there's even being able to say that out loud, like, I don't like my child right now. And I've been hearing like kind of almost like ripples of that, where women are like, no, it really gets that bad. And I love my child and I feel terrible for thinking that way, and I can't talk to anybody. So then if you do go to this machine, maybe you actually do start finding some solace there that you should be finding in another human, but there hasn't been the space for it. And so I just appreciate you said kind curiosity. You've been saying that throughout the show. And you were talking initially about that as it pertains to ourselves, having a kind and curious approach to whatever's going on inside of us, because that judgment that we're assigning towards someone else, granted, there's a legal system that judges for us. It's not just like, oh, should she have done that or not? I think we can all agree, no. But this judgment, let's say, to someone who has not committed a murder on 3 accounts, but maybe they are struggling with not feeling like they like their child, or they're really struggling even just with thoughts that are really dark, regardless if you're in postpartum or you're just in depression. The ability to have the kind and curious type of perspective for other people is a mirror for how we view ourselves. And that is so important, because if we can't find safety with ourselves, there is no way we're going to find safety with anyone else. So I'd love to kind of bring us into a close here and ask you, you said that as you pursued more so of the traditional means of support early on when you had burnout, you also started to kind of regain that relationship with yourself. And you talked about having the like mindfulness practice, but you also brought up like running and having those types of communications and community with other people. So I'd love to hear like 3 to 4 different, hey, like put these tools in your toolbox if you want to kind of get to that next level.
Yeah. Thank you for the conversation and the tangent. I do want to call out something that you highlighted around turning to a bot versus a human, and this will tie into my tips. But I think so much of what technology has given us is like a cheap thrill version of the real thing, right? So we can get on a dating app and swipe and feel like we're connecting without the vulnerability of being fully seen by somebody for all of our flaws and like out at a bar or pickleball or whatever it is, right? We can unload how we're feeling about our children to Claude and turn on privacy mode or whatever it is. And we don't have to feel that vulnerability of sharing that with another human being. Here's the thing. People have had great success with online dating. I sometimes use AI as a reframe tool. We talked about the R's of resilience. Reframing is when we see something differently. Sometimes AI can reflect something back to us. The problem is when it becomes, it's like, it's like the fast food, right? And eating McDonald's, everyone's like, that's fine. The problem is when that becomes our diet. The problem is when we stop going outside and having real interactions with people and we're on our phone instead, on social media or dating apps. The problem is when we stop having those real relationships and we're relying on an AI solely. So when you're thinking about building out a plan for whatever is most important to you in 2026 and beyond, that could be brain health, it could be performance in the workplace, I would love for you to think about, what are the human skills that I treasure the most, the aspects of my health or wellness that are most important to me? And what are some micro habits that I can put into place to help affirm my values in action? It's so often, Christine, that there's a gap between knowing and doing. And this is called the knowing show. What are we doing about the knowing we have? What is one 60-second action you can commit to? It might be breathing. It might be calling somebody on your way home from work and really talking to a human. It might be making that decision to leave your phone inside when you walk the dog in the morning, or reaffirm writing down a gratitude list right before you go to bed or first thing when you wake up. I can give you tips all day long. What I think is often missing from that is somebody holding space for you to really be accountable to the fact that you are wiring your brain every single day by what you do, what you choose to do. We all have those same 1,440 minutes of the day. Take 1 minute for your brain, whatever matters most to you. Pull out a nugget from this conversation and start one new healthy habit that will support positive neuroplasticity. So you are not just knowing, but you are doing in line with your values and your full potential.
So good. I'm so grateful for this. There were some questions in the chat that we weren't able to get to, so maybe we might have to have you back, Dorsey. Thank you so much. This was such an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful for your approach to life and for your brilliance. So grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
How can people learn more about you?
Please check out our websites, dorseystandish.com or mastermindmeditate.com. I think I'm streaming from those handles. I don't know if they show up at mastermindmeditate, at Dorsey Standish. Would love to connect with y'all. And if you had a question we didn't get to, please send me a DM or reach out on our website. I would love to continue the conversation about neuroscience and the intersection of wellness and performance.
Wonderful. Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in to the Knowing Show. I will actually see you later today in just about a little bit more than 2 hours, and we'll do our normal show. So, Dorsey, thank you, my friend.